Welcome to the 44th edition of the Meadowlarkers podcast. My name is Amin. I'm joined, as always, by Kate Fagan and Howard Bryant, who comes to us live from the house that Arthur Ashe built, U.S. Open. Before we get into today's very interesting topic, I want to ask Howard very quickly, what's it like to witness the last hurrahs of greatness for Serena Williams?
Is it the last hurrah of greatness for Serena Williams? Because she keeps winning. Well, we know this is the end, supposedly, but it didn't look like the end last night, so I got no predictions.
How surprised are you that she's definitively calling it a wrap after this one?
I think she's done, and I think she's done because now she's kind of speaking in the past tense. And as Dave Stewart once told me, once you announce your retirement, you're retired, like while you're playing, that is. I know Tom Brady took a little summer off, but it was off season. It wasn't as though he announced his retirement to start the season. He sort of had a, back and forth. But with this one, I think she knows this is it because you can hear her talking about it. There's a rumor going around here that I refuse to engage in, but when Gayle King and they were talking about, building a family and the whole thing, there were people who were whispering, is she already pregnant? I'm like, oh, here we go. That's another news story. I don't even want to deal with. I'm like, how about this? We'll deal with that if it ever gets announced. But that was the other, because I think Gayle King asked her on the, right and post match, if you're going to start a family right away. And Serena looked, and all of a sudden that just set off a whole bunch of other things. But it's been great. It's a really interesting story, obviously, watching the, watching these last several matches. And it's for another podcast for another time, but all that comes with this as well, in terms of the GOAT conversation and the marketing and the manufacturing and the discussion and the reopening of the Open. There's a lot here, and we're going to have some fun with it at at a future Meadowlarkers to come.
There you go. That's called the tease, ladies and gentlemen.
It is. It's something.
Well, what do you think, Howard, or Amin too, about the difference between an athlete who announces their retirement ahead of their final Open year, whatever it is, versus those who go quietly after the season?
I think the ones who announce at the beginning of the season, this will be my final year, it depends on how cynical you are. If you're really cynical, it's because they just want the gifts. And everybody just wants,
the farewell tour.
They want exactly. Everybody wants the farewell tour. They want that last, center of attention homage and on the video board and the whole thing. But if you're not that cynical, then I think that the message is very clear. I don't want to do this anymore. I'm ready not to do this anymore. And I remember when I talked to David Ortiz about this in 2017, he was actually hitting 300 and playing really well. And the Red Sox would end up winning the World Series the next year. And we were in Oakland, and I said to him, hey, man, why are you quitting? I mean, you're hitting 3-something. I said, you're leading the team in home runs. What's up? And he was like, my fucking feet hurt. He's like, it's hard to put on a pair of baseball shoes every day. So like emotionally, he's like, I don't want to do this anymore. I don't want to do this. I don't want to exercise. And he's like, I look at the clubhouse, and he's looking at Mookie Betts and Jackie Bradley and everybody. He goes, and I don't know these guys. Where's Manny? Where's Pedro? He was a man out of time. So I do think there's a difference. When you quit ahead of time, you're like, game over.
Yeah. And let me jump in real quick, because I think too, there's also a different layer to the question of people or athletes who announce their retirement ahead of time. I do think there's a category as well of athletes who probably didn't want to, but the people around them encouraged them that it was better for the sport, better for the fans of it, better for growing the game. Like here, I'm thinking of someone like Sue Bird. Doesn't seem like someone who would go on a farewell tour.
Yeah, well, Kate, there's a lot of that going on here. To be perfectly honest, there's been a lot of discussion that the Open had said, hey, because I never thought Serena was going to quit. I really didn't. I thought she was going to just go away, because she says, I don't do goodbyes very well. And she had really been sort of consistent about that. Then all of a sudden, comes the Vogue article, which is part of her fashion side of her business. And then she doesn't do an interview without mentioning Serena Ventures. And so there's that piece of it. And then the US Open is sort of like, you're going to give us a chance to do this thing right. I mean, we're getting back to full, pre-COVID levels. They sold 30,000 tickets. I mean, so all of the different components of this are suggesting that, yeah. And I think that's appropriate in some ways. Hey, let us, do us a solid. we could use this.
I think there's another component to this that is perhaps the opposite of the narcissism or whatever you want to call it, of saying, give me my flowers on my way out. It's the athlete who understands once they start going through it, like, kind of don't want to stop doing this. This is fun. I miss the camaraderie or whatever it is. Obviously, in the case of Serena as an individual athlete, it's a little different, but from a team sport standpoint, guys like being around the guys and all. And so by announcing it before the season, it's kind of like posting on Twitter, I'm going to lose 10 pounds by the end of the month. You have to do. You're held accountable now, as opposed to holding it within, keeping it a secret. Now you get the chance to change your mind. Like, I don't know, let's do it one more year. And then you say, oh, I can't believe I did this one more year. Then something happens. You're like, okay. I remember Vince Carter, while he was still playing during the finals, he would do the jump with us. He would be there live on location and do the jump. And we'd ask him, when are you going to hang it up and come join us full time? And he said, he'd always say 2 more years, but he'd say that every year. Because, for as much as the hassles of playing and that Big Poppy story is funny, because that's what a lot of guys say. I don't get tired of playing. I get tired of getting ready to play, and I get tired of recovering from playing. Those are the things. Vince Carter said, dunking is fine, jumping is fine. It's landing that's the big issue. Right? So by kind of announcing this ahead of time, you prevent, a decision being made at the height of euphoria. Like, I can do this for 5 more. Tom Brady's still doing it. Like, to prevent that, you get out in front of it at the beginning and say, this is it. This is it. Whatever happens, this is it. And it's going to be interesting to see what happens to Serena on this swan song, if it is indeed one. But we're not here to talk about swan songs. Yes, that's coming soon to a Meadowlarkers near you. We're here today to talk about the exact opposite end of the spectrum. Not the end, but the beginning, the humble beginning. FX and Hulu have a streaming show called Welcome to Wrexham, in which Ryan Reynolds, the world famous Hollywood actor, you know him from Deadpool, from Green Lantern, which, by the way, is the Cinephobe episode this week. So make sure you're catching Cinephobe wherever you get podcasts. Yeah. And
crossover alert.
Yes, sir. And then Rob McElhenny, who is the creator and star of Always Sunny in Philadelphia, a very funny show that also airs on FX. The two of these guys got together, ironically, because Rob works on another show that he created called Mythic Quest that appears on Apple Plus. One of the writers on the show is a Brit, and he's a huge soccer fan, huge EPL fan. And so through this co-worker / writer, Rob McElhenny is introduced to the world of professional soccer in England, and the passions and the exuberance, the ups and downs. And it reminded him very much of his childhood being a Philadelphia sports fan. And so he said, I want to get in on this, knowing nothing about the sport. I want to get on this. I want to buy a club. Finds out that they cost a lot of money. So he kept going down the divisions until he got to one where he could somewhat afford with the help of someone else's money, and that's Ryan Reynolds. And so the two of them collaborated. They buy this club called Wrexham. It's based out of Wales. It is about 4 or 5 divisions deep away from the Chelseas and the Man United of the world.
Yep.
Right. And said, wouldn't it be nice if we bought this club, put a little elbow grease into it, and help them ascend the rankings throughout this pyramid of English professional soccer. And wouldn't it be fun if we filmed ourselves doing this? And so that's the premise of this entire series, is them buying the club, them now owning the club and putting in investments. And when I first heard about this show, I thought it was going to be a lot of hijinks and funny and silliness between these two very funny people. And what I've discovered now, I'm 4 episodes in, what it is like Hard Knocks, but a grittier version. A version where they show you the firing of the coach, the hiring of the new coach, a version where they show you the signing of a big name player and the jealousies among the other players about how much money this big name player cost. And it rises a lot of questions. But first and foremost, I want to start with this because it's very apparent that this very downtrodden club has a very strong support base. Is there anything in America that can compare to the almost, xenophobic levels of support that the English soccer fan has of their local club? Not of the big ones, not of the big household names, Arsenal and Man City. I'm talking about a club like Wrexham. Let me start with you, Kate. What's the comp here for us in America?
Well, that's what I was trying to piece together while watching Welcome to Wrexham is there a comp? I guess the closest we could say, and Howard, you'd be the expert here, is your local minor league baseball team. I mean, that seems to be in the US the only level of fandom in which communities do engage, even though the sport is not being played at the highest possible levels in the world. Otherwise, you look across the spectrum, you're like, college football, maybe a little bit, but that's different than the 5th tier, the National League 5 down in soccer in England. College football would be, 1 level down, possibly because we don't have a bunch of levels. Basketball, same thing, college, but the only even close comparison is minor league baseball. And I'm not sure we can even make it a 1-to-1 because we have a minor league team here in Charleston. We have the Charleston River Dogs. We go once a year to see them, and I don't go to watch baseball. I don't go because I care if the River Dogs win the Southern League. I'm not even sure if that's right. They're affiliated with the Tampa Bay Devil Rays, but I don't go and I don't care how they perform. And I'm not sure there's exceptions, but I don't think you're going to a minor league baseball game because you care if your team wins, because then they can ascend and get out of one league and up into another, the way the structure works in the EPL league. Howard, do you have a comp that's better than possibly minor league baseball?
Yeah, I did have a comp, and I think you're right. We don't the systems are not comparable because we don't have the same relegation system. And also, they don't apply to you because you're not from South Carolina. And we're talking about these people, they live and die there generationally when they're looking at that town. So you don't even have a chance necessarily to have that sort of protection of your town because you're not from there. So, and that's the same, it's also true of the minor leagues as well. When you look at a lot of the minor league teams, not just the players, but the restructuring of the minor leagues, there are very, very, very few minor league teams that are so connected to a region that they supersede the big club. Everybody knows their feeder systems, and everybody, whether you're the Pawtucket Red Sox or the Toledo Mud Hens, or even, the Columbus Clippers or some of the famous minor league, the Durham Bulls, some of the famous baseball teams, don't have that. So that piece of it, I did not feel like there was an American comp to it. But where I did see an American comp was high school. That is probably the closest thing where it's an in or out type of thing, where this belongs to us. Maybe football in the South, Friday Night Lights type of thing, but also where you have a lot of these blue collar towns that have their team and they protect their region, and there's a bloodline to it. So to me, the only thing that I really saw, I didn't see anything on the pro side that made this comp.
Mm.
But I did see it in terms of high schools, and also in some of the community junior college places too. I remember when I was in California covering, when I was at the Oakland Tribune, I had to go out and cover, I think it was Laney College, had to go out and go play a game out in Gold Country out in Sacramento. And it was one of the most hostile environments I'd ever been to. I'm like, I didn't know anybody cared about this level of basketball that much. And it was, I think class-wise, no, but maybe racially, yes. And not just xenophobically, but also the level of regionalism.
Mm-hmm.
But I didn't think that, I don't think that our sports model is set up to have anything like that.
Yeah, I thought about college football even in the sense that or college sports in general. Like if you go to a UCSD game, which is Division II basketball, like there are going to be people in the stands, right? And you think about Georgia Southern football. It's a powerhouse within that subset of college football. But ultimately, it was just the passion is palpable coming off the screen of these people who are so invested in what they know is a losing proposition, right? Because it's ours. That's a very England thing. There's a quote in the latest episode where someone says, football isn't life or death. It's much more important than that.
Right.
That's where they're at. It's like, no, this is.
Yeah, but there's another reason for that too, which I think is, once again, I don't think there's any reason to comp it to anything else, but when you get that, and the way it's shot and everything, because England is so damn ugly anyway, it's just so, it's so gray. It's always so gray and grim and icy and awful. And so you do get that feel like that. That's not San Diego over there, right? And so this is, it has, I feel like listening to like a Smiths album or something, Birmingham and some of these others, I'm just, whenever you look at those towns, it's like, okay, just show me the smokestack and we can be on our way. It's also because it's so old. So you're looking at some of these clubs that have been around since 1900, since the mid to late 1800s. And so because of that, if there was a comp here, or if something that we could sort of relate it to, it would have been back in the old days when Major League Baseball only extended out to St. Louis, and the local team, there were only 8 teams or 12 teams, and the local team, your industrial team, those teams were the teams that you saw every day, and those are the teams that you really, really cared about. Maybe even the Pacific Coast League teams too, which they had been around for 50 years before baseball got there, before MLB, came out in 57 to the West Coast. So that level of generational passion and protection, we just don't get here because we don't have anything that is as permanent to our, permanently local. I would say though, however, that if you wanted to make an American comp to it, you would have to go to the pro level. You would have to go to the Dallas Cowboys. You'd have to go to the Celtics. You'd have to go to the Montreal Canadiens, or to find the one piece of it, to find the protection piece of it, but not the class piece of it. The class piece of it, I don't see any comps.
You know where I went? I went to the Midwest. As they're describing Wrexham, I'm like, this is Pittsburgh, this is Cleveland, this is Detroit, this is all these cities that feel forgotten because starting in the late 80s and 90s, the as industrialized jobs moved overseas or outsourced to Asia, a lot of these factories closed down, and cities that were once bustling, metropolises became ghost towns, and everyone there is either really old or really young. When you talk about that inheritance, there's a character. There's a person, a fan in the show who talks about. I remember going to my first game and I sat there, and he points to the exact section. Me and my dad, and then he's got his kids with him, and he's walking them around the pitch, and he says, "And this is where we scattered Granddad's ashes." Like his father was basically buried on the grounds. This stadium, which by the way is the oldest stadium, oldest in-use professional soccer stadium in the world. That's their claim. The racetrack is what it's called. So there's a lot of, as they're describing, and the guy's talking about how COVID was so hard on his mental health because he couldn't go to games. And that's the part where they talk about it's not life or death. It's way more important than that. It's how these people were just devastated by not having the team to go around, to rally around, to a team that's terrible. I'm sorry. I thought about the Cleveland Browns the whole time. I was like, this is Cleveland through and through.
You know what's interesting to me about this first 15 minutes of the conversation is that we have focused our attention on the Wrexham storyline and the underdog storyline, the people of Wrexham, what the club is. That's kind of odd and juxtaposed with what the framing of the actual documentary is. Most of the documentary, you are behind the shoulder of a Ryan Reynolds or a Rob McElhenny. You're not, obviously they're introducing you to a couple key people on the team and a couple key people, and they want you to get invested in Wrexham. But for the most part, this documentary is, hey, can these two Hollywood superstars turn this club around?
It changes. So it evolves past that.
Yeah, well, I mean, I've only seen 2 episodes so far, but I do think there's a conversation to be had besides just, did the storylines like sink their teeth into me? Yes, I am a sucker for a good sports doc. I am a sucker for an underdog story. And clearly these 2 actors understand storylines deeply. But I do think there is an interesting conversation to be had about what we're actually watching here. Are we actually just watching Hollywood power brokers seeing how far their power and prestige can take them? Like, how much can they leverage just their star power to have a small investment on the relative scale of sports team and leverage their name and power to just see how big Hollywood stars actually resonate in the world? What are we watching about? I mean, do we even know why Ryan Reynolds bought this club? I mean, we kind of get a sense of Rob McElhenny. He's a Philly guy. He's gritty. The Eagles winning the Super Bowl is one of the top 5 moments of his life, and he just loves that storyline. Whereas, and then it's like, and Ryan Reynolds has money. So I mean, I think we should get into a little bit of beyond. There's some amazing things about this Wrexham story, but there are some things that make me feel a little bit weird.
Well, I think all of that is really appropriate because look, we're watching what they produced. And so in watching what they've produced, what are you seeing? And I think when I first started watching it, one of the first things that hit me was the images that were being shown. As always, my mind looks at the cliche of the diehard fan and who those fans really are. And it's very interesting watching both the images here where you're looking at essentially, I mean, it's England. So of course the town is, gritty blue collar and everybody sort of loves that. And it's, all white and the players are not. And then you look at the same thing when Rob is talking about his love for the Eagles, and you show all the fans going to Eagles games, not a single black person in any of those shots. And then they show, then they show the field, and it looks like Roots, right? I mean, so we always see that. That's what it's always going to be, and that's the selling part of the story. But then the other part of it is what Kate brought up, which is the why are you here piece of this. And I don't think they ever said exactly what the team cost. So I was sort of like, okay, well, how much did you actually pay for this? Yeah. And why are you here? My biggest fear when I watched the first episode and started the second episode was, I hope you guys aren't really here just to make fun of these people. Mm-hmm. That this is you guys showing how much flex you've got, and let's see what can happen. And you get to, the 2 actors get to play owner, but you're actually playing with these people's lives because they actually do care about this thing at a certain level. And by the time you get through the second episode, you notice that business is creeping in here, that what do we really want here? This isn't just a cute little local soccer team or football team. We want to win. And what does that cost? What what sort of investment does that entail? So I am looking forward to getting into episodes 3 and 4 and going forward, because I was sort of looking at this, thinking the same thing, Kate, about Ryan Reynolds, going, okay, what's your passion here? Why are you here? Why did you agree to do this? And also the fact that those two had never met. They're not even friends. It's not like, oh, we got to. So they're
the modern,
wanted to buy it. Yeah.
The modern day friends, right? Like they're internet friends. They know each other through the industry, and they know each other. They're friends through social media, but that was their first time meeting in person, which is kind of funny because it's not like one lives in Philadelphia and other lives in Vancouver.
Yeah, exactly.
They live in LA.
They're in the same town and don't know each other. So there's a lot there that I also think about from the standpoint of the creation of the show. You guys are leaving out some kind of important stuff that makes you trust the endeavor a little bit less. If you guys don't know each other, if you're not engaged in this in a certain way, then why exactly are you here, Mr. Deadpool?
So it's a lot of great points, very interesting things brought up, and there's stuff that's brought up by them, by the way, throughout the process. Because as they're trying to buy the team, as they're trying to make decisions, it's always brought up to them. In I believe episode 3, they're trying to hire a new manager. They've sacked the old manager, and they're trying to get a new manager. And the guy they want is kind of like the Larry Brown of English professional soccer. This guy gets bad teams and gets them up. He's got them, I think, 3 different clubs promoted through various levels, whereas I don't think any manager has had more than one anywhere. So this is the guy, but they're asking him to move because he's, I believe, at the championship level. They're asking him to move several divisions down. So the equivalent would be grabbing John Calipari and saying, hey, can you come coach Arizona Western, which is a D3 college? And so
Ryan Reynolds is the owner, so you're going to be on TV.
So it's, the funny thing here is the guy refuses to be interviewed on camera. He refuses. He has a phone. He says no at first because it's a step down. And then Rob says, let me talk to him. And they show Rob talking to him on the phone. And the caption says that Phil Parkinson refused to have his side of the conversation recorded. So there's a large skepticism about them in the sense of what is your purpose? And how do I know that you're not going to do this for 18 months or whatever, and then the team doesn't get promoted, and then you guys just kind of lose interest with your new toy? So there's a lot of trepidation by people on their involvement. What are they here for, and are they here for the long haul? Because I guess there's a skepticism going on, obviously, of American or North American interest coming in and buying these clubs.
And whose reason are you here for? Are you here for our reasons or your own?
And so, you talk about the business creeping in. One of the I don't know how much they paid for the club. I'm sure I could probably Google it, but I kind of want to leave it. I want to preserve the viewing experience for myself. But they talk about the pitch wasn't good enough. They got a brand new pitch. It cost them £100,000. And then like one game in, they're like, this is not good enough. Well, how much is it going to cost to fix it? Another £200,000. So we're even at this level, there are certain
it's a money pit,
unalienable costs that you have to deal with. And as a result, they bring in sponsorship. It says the sponsorship went from local tractor company to TikTok, right? The sponsorship on the back went from local saloon or whatever to Expedia. And these are all them flexing their Hollywood might of saying we can get big money sponsorship. Why? Because we're doing a TV show. And a TV show, in essence, is free advertising for these companies. But I guess my question becomes, do we care about motivations? Right. If the results happen, if they're putting money into the club, as a fan of Wrexham, these people are coming in, they're pumping money in, and they're trying to do things the right way in terms of the best manager they can get, trying to acquire the best possible players, et cetera, et cetera. Do I care if all of this is basically something for them to sell so that people can watch and comment?
What I care about is how it impacts the story and the journey of this club in ways unseen. Because this is not a documentary where All or Nothing, right? On where that's the name of the one on
on Netflix.
Where the club already exists and we are just parachuting in to capture it. There's going to be some distortion there no matter what, just like there's distortion on every documentary possible. But this is really like a real life. Before we even step foot into this storyline, we have decided we are recording it. Part of the story is the recording of the story, right? This is like Nora Ephron, everything is copy brought to life. We are not 3 years in and we are recording. It is part of the process. And I think there was this line in Vulture that I think really hammers home like a thought that I had that I couldn't quite name, where they said, so the documentary, and this is what they said, quote, a tool to materially increase the value of the club and an insurance policy against failure. So it's like you've got this recording of their pursuit of Wrexham and them leading this club. And the documentary is both like a way to grow it and a guardrail against if they fail, which is that to me, that's a smart financial play by them. What I wonder as a viewer is if everything is copy and you've brought in cameras from day one, and I'm a believer that like a camera on something, a photograph of something we think of as real, it changes everything about how this is going to work. So then you have to say, like, I'm really watching a blurred docuseries TV show. This is not really how the world works, how the world of fifth level National League football works.
Because
like, it is
money at that level, well, even without the presence of the cameras, right? The ruining the presence of the observer ruining the experiment. Just the fact that the immense amount of money being dumped into a National League club, that's not normal.
That never happens.
That doesn't make any, that's not natural. Yeah.
Well, that is the equivalent of Michael Jordan joining the Birmingham baseball team and buying the team a bus, like a brand new bus. It's like all of a sudden we're in a bizarro world now for our level, all because of one guy.
The
question I'm asking myself as I'm watching Wrexham is like, I'm not really watching a soccer documentary. I'm watching something else.
You're watching a power documentary.
Well,
yes,
see,
that's right.
This is where I think that the next two episodes are gonna clear that up, because I'm watching this and I'm saying this is Hard Knocks if they showed me the stuff that I really care about. Right? Like, not the is like there's some of that fringe stuff in the first couple episodes of which players are going to be here next year, is who's going to be here for the Americans coming in with the money, right? But it very quickly starts to go into stuff like, again, the manager, the idea that he's coaching for his job right here, and he gets let go as a result, and the search for a new manager. The signing of, there's a player called Paul Miller that they signed, who's, again, a couple of divisions above where they are and an incredible goal scorer. And they say, well, one of the reasons why they have a chance to get him is because he wants to be close to home, because he's got a young family. So they bring him in, and it costs them, of course, because, you're asking someone to drop down divisions. And then they have like this scene where the other players are sitting around talking about, something costs a lot of money. By the time I get paid, half of it's already gone to taxes, whatever. And someone says, you should ask Paul to pay for it. He's got more than enough. And then they start mocking him and say, I told him, you owe us 50 quid every time you miss the target, because for the amount of money you're getting paid, you shouldn't miss fuck all. And like, it's joking and laughing, but you're watching them like,
it's not funny.
This is serious. These guys are really like kind of like rubbed the wrong way that they opened the coffers for this guy, despite him being a great talent. And that's the stuff that made me realize, when I watch Hard Knocks, I don't get to hear that. I don't get to hear the guy say, I'm fucking better than him. I'm better than that guy. You guys got, Jared Goff starting quarterback. I'm better than him. I like, there's a little bit of that this season of Hard Knocks with the linebacker, Malcolm Rodriguez, where the coach is saying, hey, I don't care if he's an undrafted rookie. I'll start him because he's playing the best one out of this whole group. What we don't get is the group saying, this brown noser over here. Oh, you all up in the kissing teacher's pet, da da da. We have none of that real part of that, which is a very human thing. We're getting that in this documentary and in this docuseries. And so even as I have my alerts up for, well, it is produced and it is not only produced by, it is the creation of the people who own the club. So that everything is going to have a sheen on it. I think there's a part of it because they are so far removed, because it's not like the Ford family or the Haslams or whatever, where it's like, this club is my life. They're removed enough. We're like, yeah, I'll show you the dirty laundry because that ain't me. I'm over here. I'm in Hollywood. And that to me is fascinating.
Yeah, I mean, I think there was a scene in, I think it was the second episode that I did recognize. I mean, in that moment, it was the scene where they're actually in the locker room with the player who got red carded.
Mm-hmm.
And you got to see someone's reaction, not glossified. This is and not making millions of dollars so they can just console themselves that whatever, I got 10 million in the bank. You got to see somebody who not just disappointed his team, but knows that likely his professional career is over because he made a bad decision. And that's like a grittiness of sport that we almost never see anymore. That takes me back to, like, you know, AAU games where you think so much is on the line, so much more than just money. Like, back to your point, it's not just football, it's so much more than that. And having cameras in the room there for somebody who's not practiced at having cameras in the room created an interesting moment. So I don't deny that there is something about this where we get to see parts of sport that are different. It's just, like, to Howard's, you know, quick aside earlier, I feel like more so what I'm watching is a power documentary. Like, how big and influential is celebrity actually? Is it so powerful that we could leverage our way up? Like that, you know, the shows that people have made where it's like, you start with a spoon, can you end up with a house? And you've got to trade your way up.
Yeah.
That's almost like, it feels like, okay, we're starting with 2 Hollywood celebrities. It's not that they have $1 billion in the bank, but can they leverage their power, their cachet to take a 5th level Wrexham team? And I'm probably, they think the sky is the limit, right? We're Ryan Reynolds and Rob McElhenny. And that's what I'm watching. Yeah.
Howard, is it exploitative?
Oh, of course it is. Anytime you put a camera on somebody, there's a reason for it. And it's going to change your behavior once you know you're being filmed. I think that the real balance that they're going to have to navigate is if and when the people of that town feel exploited. And that's when people will turn on you. It's all good because they're so downtrodden, they're happy anybody's paying any attention to them.
Right.
But what happens when the dynamic changes, or if they want out? You're not invested in this long term. These folks are invested in this for generations. It has a dynastic quality that sort of makes both the two R's involved here. They look so out of place. As we go forward, we'll see if they become more enmeshed in this and it becomes a bit more personal. But part of it feels a little more like Empire as well. Let's just see what we can do. Like, it's almost in some ways in our American attitudes, it's like flip this house. You know, let's just take this little fixer and let's see what we can do with it. And you are playing with people's lives when you do that. On the other hand, you may be able to do a lot of good with that because people want that team to succeed. What I haven't seen yet, and I'm looking forward to seeing it in the documentary, is what's their attendance, since everybody lives and dies with this team so much. I haven't seen a shot yet where the stadium was full. But maybe it's also because of COVID.
Yeah.
Exactly. So, but I wonder traditionally, you know, there's a lot of passion, but do they sell out? Do they fill the house pre-COVID?
These English football clubs even these small parochial ones tend to sell out. Now, a lot of that is because, going back to what you said earlier, Howard, the introduction of business hasn't happened to them, right? So 10 quid gets you a ticket, standing room, wherever it is in the stadium, right? So the level of where here in the United States we've kind of grown accustomed to.
Well, it's a vacation when you do that now. If you
Yeah,
want to
yeah. If
go,
you go to a game, yeah.
it's almost $1,000. If you want to go, parking tickets for four, $200 per ticket, depending on where you're going. That's changes who gets to go.
I was watching the Lakers documentary on Hulu. It's called Legacy.
The Antoine Fuqua doc.
The Anton Fuqua, yes. And so they talked about Dr. Jerry Buss. When he took over the team, a courtside ticket was, I want to say like $25, $30. And he jacked the prices up to $150, and everyone lost their mind, right? But he saw that there was a level of revenue that was being left on the table because no one thought about it like that. They're just like, yeah, we just show, you want a ticket to the game. Keyshawn Johnson once told me he went to like the 81 World Series as a kid. I called bullshit. There's no chance. He said, no, the ticket was like $10 or something like that.
Why would you call bullshit on that?
Because it just didn't make sense to me that a kid, like at 10 years old or however old Keyshawn was, could make it all the way. I'm not talking about in these proverbial way. I'm talking about literally physically make it all the way from South Central Los Angeles all the way up to Chavez Ravine, and then buy a ticket to the World Series for $10. Like it sounds, and this is my youth speaking, it's my relative youth speaking. It sounds like Fantasyland.
Yeah,
there's no chance.
Well, the reason why it sounds like Fantasyland is because those days are long over. Two things to remember about the Dodgers, about baseball and the Dodgers in particular. Number one, baseball was always the sport that was the lowest priced, so everybody could see it because it was the American game, right? That justified, because it justified the fact that baseball also had 81 games. There's a lot of games, so everybody got to go. And the Dodgers in particular, when they moved from Brooklyn, and especially when Dodger Stadium opened in '62, the Dodgers historically have always had the lowest prices. I mean, super low. Like the bleachers in the '80s were $2. Fenway Park bleachers today, like $50. And so the Dodgers had always kept ticket prices low. And so it always changed who got to go to Dodger games. And I think part of the reason was because of the battle. If you ever read Eric's book, oh goodness, Stealing Home, Eric Nussbaum's book, Stealing Home, on the creation of Chavez Ravine, the Dodgers are really specific. Yankees, no, I don't know. Maybe he could sneak in and go there because New York's a little different, but Yankee Stadium has so many seats. But Dodger Stadium is a really unique place in that regard. San Francisco too, but Dodger Stadium, that story is completely plausible, even for a World Series game, because of the history of the tickets there. So that's actually a really cool story.
That's awesome. But I guess that comes to, sorry, just to wrap it up, comes to the attendance at these English soccer games, because I remember going to England 5 years ago, and I was in Brentford, which at the time was either one division down or two divisions down. And I said, "Oh, that's cool. Let me go to a game." And everyone laughed, like, "Go to a game? Like, this thing sold out for months, like for years."
Yeah.
It's because everybody goes, and it's such an ingrained part of the community. This is what they do. They don't have anything else.
Yeah, it'll be interesting because one thing that they have not addressed, at least in the first two episodes, is truly what their long-term goal is here.
Yeah,
they've introduced us to a short-term goal of getting them out of the fifth tier, the National League, and up. And that's a set of problems that seems maybe expensive, but not crazy expensive, manageable. But like 3 years from now, if you've succeeded, there's a different set of problems that are much more expensive. And to that point, you go from, sure, this is a community game you can get into, to no, we actually need to have exclusive seating because we need to pay for our new midfielder. And I don't know. I mean, does Wrexham? I mean, I guess if I lived in Wrexham, I'd be happy. I'd be like, fine, I'll watch it on TV, and I want to be in the second league or whatever the cap is for Wrexham. One thing I do love about the series, and I found it very enjoyable, even though I like have meta kind of questions about what I'm actually watching. I was interested for all 30 minutes of each episode. But one thing I love about it, and I have to bring things back to women's sports, is it very clearly nails the fact that sports is about the stakes of something and the storylines. Like that's all they're introducing us to. The storylines in Wrexham and the stakes of what they need to do, which is to get out of the fifth league and get up a league. This is not even close to the best football in England. And yet I am like, it has fortified my desire to watch their team, even though those are probably the fifth tier players. And I think the more examples we have of that, because I think in the US, we think we're obsessed with, it has to be the best of the best. And that's like the cultural messaging we get. And this Wrexham story very clearly shows us we love sports for mostly reasons beyond that it has to be like the most elite athlete ever who played it. And I like that part of it. I like that storyline.
It just goes back to the idea that, you have to be connected to what you're watching and who you're watching. And as the business expands and the empire expands and the money expands, the less connected you get to it, the less it matters, no matter how good everybody is. I don't care about this, which is a live golf conversation for a Meadowlarkers coming near you,
That's
right?
True.
This is
That's true, yeah.
Exactly. This is another sort of question that we'll be monitoring and asking, because it's not always about the best. It's about how closely you feel to this entity. It's ours, and we love it because it's ours, not because it's the best.
Yep.
I'm so curious about, with every great venture of passion, when the money comes around and mess it all up. Kate, what you talked about, that's exactly what I was thinking, because I'm watching them. They're interviewing these fans, and they're like, finally, these guys are going to come in. They're gonna use their juice. They're going to spend money. The club's going to get better. The players are excited. Oh, we got owners that'll spend money, until they realize, yeah, there are people who are sacrificial in this endeavor, and some of them are you players, and some of them are you, the manager. And at some point, Kate, you're right, because season one is getting out of the National League, where they've been for 14 straight years, which I believe is either the longest active streak or the longest streak ever, and getting to the next level. But presumably this thing is supposed to keep going as they keep getting higher and higher, right? Which maybe that's Ryan Reynolds' ultimate answer to why he's involved. But to continue the show, that is. But I'm wondering, that's all well and good, and the fans will cheer it all on, up until the point where, yeah, the cost of us being better is that you can't come to the game anymore.
Yeah.
And Kate, I believe you sounded like the ugly American when you said, it doesn't matter, I'll watch on TV and it'll be great, my favorite team is winning. And that's the part where I think the American business sense comes in and smashes right into this parochial, provincial way of life of, it's not just that I want the team to be good. It's important for me to not only be there, but take my children there, and that one day they'll grow up and they'll take their children to this thing as well. And when those two opposite forces meet, there are going to be some broken hearts along the way.
I think that's a perfect place to end.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
I love ending
thank
on
you.
broken hearts.
Yeah. Don't we all? Thank you, Kate and Howard. Tune in next time, where maybe we talk about the last of the real ones. That's what I'm calling Serena. She's the last of the. Every superstar that's come after her in athletics and sports is of the new model social media creature. She is the last, I believe, of the Mohicans, of the superstar athletes the way we remember them. And I can't wait for that conversation.
It's a good way to put it.